I'm Caroline Woolley of Meaden and More, Forensic Accountants. This is my video series, and I'm interviewing interesting people that I've met over the last 20 years. It's called Business Interruption and Other Stories, and some of these are more D&I than BI. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing Katherine Kanaga. Now, I worked with Katherine at Marsh many years ago. When I was working in the claims team, I used to work with her on various projects. She was international property practice leader, so working with the placement teams around the international region. Now, Katherine took early retirement and recommended me for her role. So she opened up so much for me in terms of opportunity. She was a fabulous mentor. I've got so much respect for her. And since that early retirement, she's gone on to do lots of things in various areas, from antiques to helping underprivileged girls. So I will admit Katherine, and we will start the interview. And here she is. Hi, Katherine. Thank you ever so much for joining me for this. We've had a brief catch up, I know, because we haven't spoken for a little while, but it's been great to see what you've been doing via LinkedIn. And thank you very much for joining me today. I did a very brief intro just in terms of you know, how you were my mentor at Marsh, and the opportunities that you provided for me have just helped so much in my career. But you're, of course, doing some very different things now.
Yes, I retired from Marsh as the international property practice leader. I met Caroline when I was the Europe, Middle East, Africa property practice leader, and she took over from me when I came back to New York. And but I retired shortly thereafter, and since then I've been doing mostly nonprofit board work. I've been on altogether 5 boards. I'm on 3 at the moment, all very different. One an arts organization, one an after-school program for disadvantaged girls, and the other is a parks renovation project in the city of Hudson, where I live right now. So
very different. And
very different.
With 5 boards, it's not really retirement then, is it?
I've always been very active and always wanted to be and always have been involved in community work. So I've always done mentoring, both at the high school level and so when I moved here, I was very interested in being involved in the community. So a couple of the boards I'm on, I'm very much involved in community work.
Well, what we'll do is I've got a few questions to sort of guide us through, and I said that this is business interruption, but other stories as well. So I can't not tap into your BI knowledge with all those years in the business. They will sort of start off BI and then move to other areas, if that's all right.
Yeah.
But you know, you definitely, when you're at Marsh, and I know we worked on various projects all those years ago, but you recognize the importance of business interruption and as opposed to property damage, and that's why you were getting me involved. I think the term business interruption is still often misunderstood, isn't it? And in the industry, we tend to think automatically property damage. But everyone else thinks anything that interrupts business. And, you know, that's something that people will be recognizing now with coronavirus and the issues that brings. But I think from an industry perspective, is there anything that they should be doing to manage expectations? And are there any sort of parallels with what you're doing now?
Well, I think as far as, you know, COVID, I think has raised the issue of supply chains, concentration of manufacturing, those kinds of issues have really been clearly brought to the forefront. Whether or not there's a covered loss there is really beside the point. It's really how the insurance partners really should be part of the business decisions and raise the issues, because I think often when the operations part of a business is making decisions about where to place manufacturing or where to buy supplies from, or just-in-time inventory, all of those things rarely take into account how the business could be impacted by a catastrophic scenario like COVID, where things literally shut down virtually overnight. And so I think that that's where should be much more of a real partnership in the business decisions made. And business interruption, to me, was always the most fascinating part of the business, because it's about understanding how the business works, not just the plant, but really what makes the profit in a business, what drives the business. So it's much more interesting to me to really get into those kinds of parts of understanding a client.
And it's different for every single company, of course, isn't it? Even in the same industry, they approach things in different ways and different territories. It's just, definitely one size doesn't fit all.
Oh, absolutely. That's actually what always interested me about insurance, property insurance in particular, was I felt as though I never really mastered my craft, that I learned something new every day. And that, I think, has been, that was the most interesting to me, was to constantly be challenged.
And you've got to get under the skin of the business as well, haven't you, from a BI perspective, to really understand the impact. And it could be anything, because if you're looking at the impact of the business, it can be similar. It's just the duration and the extent is different. But if approaching it in that way, that it's anything that interrupts business, is a good way to look at this. And I think we were saying about coronavirus, and that's definitely sort of in a way raised the profile of business interruption as an issue, hasn't it, with everyone?
I would think so. Everything from where N95 masks came from, and again, just-in-time inventory. If you tried to buy a refrigerator during COVID, good luck.
Yeah, and you hear stories like residential building residential apartments and things where everything was stopped because they couldn't get hold of bathtubs. It's just like,
exactly.
It's just these things, and it's those pinch points that we're usually trying to look at from a BI perspective anyway. Where are the bottlenecks? Because the property damage, it doesn't align perfectly with BI, of course, because it might be 10% PD but still 100% BI. And it's you're saying about just in time. I was reading something, it's almost because of COVID, people have gone from just in time to just in case.
Yes.
That's the phrase that was used, because they're starting to stockpile things just in case something, they can't get hold of it or something goes wrong. So it's it turned everything on its head a bit. I think the managing expectations part is important for anything, and it's definitely an area where we've always seen we do need to do better as an industry to make sure that there's that understanding of BI. And it's something, when you handed the reins over to me, that that was the start of the project, wasn't it, the BI Centre of Excellence project, and definitely trying to get everyone involved in the process of that understanding. And I think some good progress has been made, but some of the issues that were around when you were in the business, unfortunately, are still there. It hasn't changed too much, but we are seeing some progress, definitely. And I think the collaboration piece, we're seeing underwriters and claims teams working together at insurers, and everyone sort of jumping in. We're doing quite a lot of pre-loss work as well, so that you don't wait for a loss to happen before testing the policy and quantifying the losses. But so starting to move away from the BI points, but still some of those are, you know, the issues are parallel with other areas. But I'm really interested, and I know others will be, in terms of the female leadership aspects, because you always came across, and still do, very calm and collected, controlled, but very much open to new ideas, and you would always listen. And they're sort of important qualities, I think, from a leadership perspective. But are there any sort of points that, you know, maybe since leaving Marsh you've reflected on, and seeing your work on the board, these boards, any sort of tips or observations that you wanted to share?
I mean, those same skill sets come much, you know, I've used certainly in the board work, and learning about new, you know, learning about new things. At the arts board that I'm on, I did not come from the arts world, but I bring the management experience, the willingness to listen, ask questions. I think too often when I was working, people in a sales call wanted to unload all the knowledge that they had, you know, as opposed to asking questions of a client and trying to understand what their interests are, and then tailor your responses to what they need. And that sounds pretty basic, but on the other hand, I can't tell you how many times I didn't witness that. And I still find that now. I think people like to talk. And unfortunately, I think they talk at people and don't come out of the room with a better understanding of the client. And in my case, you know, I joined these boards with a lot of humility, really, to try to understand what it is they need and what I can bring to the table from my background and experience to these boards, because I don't come in, as I said, understanding exactly what the Perfect 10 after school program is for disadvantaged girls in primarily Hudson and the surrounding area. And I can't begin to understand their challenges. You know, the school system here, 70% of the kids are considered economically disadvantaged. It's a very disadvantaged area with a lot of wealth gap, you know, inequality gap. And these kids have experienced things I can never understand. So all we can do, or all I can do as a board member, is to bring as much clear thinking to the process and see where we can be most helpful to the girls. And in the 10 years of that program, we've served 100 girls, and only 6 of those girls have gone to college. So, you know, we started off thinking that our goal and objective was to send girls to college, but the realities of their lives often don't allow them to do that. They need to work. So that's where we've now refocused to providing apprenticeship programs for girls, paid apprenticeship programs, so that they can be hired locally at a better wage than minimum wage.
So actually, it's actually a good thing to move the goalposts.
Yes.
I know people sometimes see that as a negative, but you've got to go with, don't just have a fixed idea of what you think they need. It's actually listening and being realistic about their environment. And I know that, you know, if not now, definitely in the past, I'm guilty of this sort of, I've got some solutions and I've got some ideas and trying to get those points across. But actually the starting point, as you say, is always, what do people actually need? It's not what we want to provide, it's what people actually need. And I remember Martin South actually saying to me once, Caroline, I know you think you've got all the solutions and you know what the problems are, but actually everyone's got to come along for the ride, and you've got to go back and make sure that is the case, because you may find other issues that also need to be dealt with. Even if your solutions are right, everyone needs to be part of that process. And yeah, definitely wise words. The perfect 10 after school sounds like an amazing setup there, and you're helping in the ways that they need. And I know I think you've made some even more progress recently, haven't you? With
we recently applied for a Google grant. We still haven't heard yet for it, but it's a global grant, and it really allowed us to fully form the apprenticeship program that we are rolling out. We've done some of it. This is much more robust than the ones we've had in the past. And your listeners may or may not know, but apprenticeship programs are much less common in the United States than they are. And a college degree is often really the focus for businesses and organizations. But what we're striving to do here, if college is not an option, we still advocate college, but if college is really not an option, then how do we prepare these girls for jobs where they can have a career as opposed to just a fast food job? And so we will pay them to work in a business. The business will have their work for free, but we'll also have classes in business skills. And we want to do it over a 10-month period so that they really have some experience. And businesses here tell us that they want to hire locally, but they can't find people with the experience that they want. So we have the jobs, but we don't have the skill sets. So we want to bring those two things together.
Well, we're seeing one of the issues that's arisen, you're saying about availability of skilled people. I mean, even on holiday down in Devon recently, some restaurants weren't open some days. Yes. It's the peak season, it's holiday season, but they couldn't get the staff. Right. And we are seeing some more unusual, less expected impact of the lockdowns and the restrictions on the movement of people. But it sounds amazing what you're doing, and I know we've been in contact separately about, because I volunteer with Empathy Lab, and it's all part of I think it's great, the diversity, equity and inclusion projects that are going on. And in relation to D&I particularly, I know that life would be a bit dull if we were all the same. So and there'd be no innovation or very little innovation, because everyone would be the same and have the same ideas. So it's great. I think the diversity in teams in all areas is important. And it's definitely a recipe for success. In terms of diversity, I'm talking about, I suppose, background, culture, gender.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Everything, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Personality. We were chatting briefly earlier, weren't we, about the Zoom calls, and how actually sometimes it's, when there's lots of people, it's even more difficult to be heard. And it's not just a gender issue, but it's actually a personality issue. If you're more of an introvert rather than extrovert.
Introverts do not do well in Zoom environments. You really have to be able to assert yourself. And so I think this format has been a lifesaver for us during this period, but it really has its limitations. And I don't think they've been fully appreciated and recognized, that some people have really not been able to advance well on Zoom. And in terms of diversity, that's been really the focus for me on another board that I'm on, where I'm the vice chair. And when I started on the board, there were 2 women out of 15 board members, a lot of very wonderful older white men were on that board. And we now have 2 people of color on the board and 6 women on the board. And it's really, again, we're seeking different backgrounds with different experience. We're being much more analytical about the kinds of board experience we bring. So we don't want too many lawyers. We don't want too many people from the investment world. We really want to have a breadth of experience on the board. And that's, so we've made a lot of progress. We still have more progress to be made. And that's been my focus on other boards as well. Even my parks renovation board, we're making sure that we have a diverse collection of people on the board representative of our community. And our community is at least half multiracial. So we're trying to make sure that it's not just the wealthier white people who tend towards that kind of a board, but that we're really fully representative.
And that's the thing, it's this you were saying about listening and seeing what people need. You know, it's actually to have the representation in a team like that. If you're supposed to be representing that wider group, then yeah, it makes sense to have that representation on the board in terms of decisions too.
It's been really great to have the kind of robust debates on the boards, as opposed to a bunch of people who just agree with each other. Yeah. So it's been, you know, it can be challenging, but it's really, I think, led to much better results in terms of our decision making.
And I think that's the case everywhere. I mean, this is where we would draw, you know, you draw parallels with business, with insurance, with the insurance industry, with other industries as well. I think, you know, this, you can talk about diversity and inclusion, but it's moved from a sort of a separate part to actually being core to the business, hasn't it? I mean, I talk about the commercial aspects of it as well, that actually, you know, it should be part of proposals, you know, our treatment of colleagues, but also our approach. It needs to be part of those proposals, and people need to realize that, you know, we're supporters. And so it's not a sideline, it's actually core, and it makes a difference. People, I think, will want to work with you more if they, you know, if they recognize that they're going to get a diverse team that actually might come up with something new to help them.
Oh, I absolutely agree, Caroline. I think that you bring different views and backgrounds, you're going to get much more interesting, more creative, more innovative views of any challenge. Well,
listen, it's been absolutely lovely to catch up with you. And I know that I said at the beginning that you were a mentor to me when I was at Marsh, and I wanted to make sure that I wanted to speak to you and so you can share some of your insights and your views with the wider world via this video interview series. But I do, good luck with the Google grant. I hope that comes about. But
me too.
Even if it doesn't, yeah.
If it doesn't, we'll do the program in a different way.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. It's the determination, and to see the assistance that you're giving, and you're making a difference. You know, we always used to talk about you know, changing the conversation, making a difference, how you can exceed expectations, and those principles are with everything, aren't they? And if you're doing slightly different work now, but those principles remain the same and remain with you, and they're lucky to have you. These boards, definitely lucky to have you, and long may it continue. But keep me informed about the Google grant, and I'll do that. I sent you through the Empathy Lab stuff as well, so I'll introduce you to Miranda, because she's got some great work on empathy as well, which is a core skill for us all, and definitely in the professional world. It's an important area. But thank you ever so much for
thank you, Caroline. It's great catching up with you too.
Yeah, really nice. Okay. I will send through the link once we're done, but thank you ever so much, and I will stop the recording now.
Take care.